Hi, I'm Randy Cantrell. Welcome to the Year of the Peer podcast with Leo Batari. This podcast is based on a simple truth. Who you surround yourself with matters. Author and keynote speaker Leo Batari will interview thought leaders from all walks of life who will share how they leverage peer advantage and show you how engaging your peers more purposefully can hold the key to greater success in business and in life. Today's guest is Sam Reese. Sam brings over 30 years of experience leading and advising senior leaders in complex organizations. As the CEO of Vistage Worldwide for the past year, Sam leads the world's largest CEO membership advisory firm. Vistage members, 21,000 strong in 17 countries, gather in trusted confidential peer advisory groups where they tackle their toughest challenges and biggest opportunities. Although Sam has been the CEO since 2016, he was a longtime Vistage member when he was with his previous company. We welcome Sam Reese to the show.
Sam Reese, welcome to the show. I can't tell you, we've been talking about just trying to make this happen throughout this year, and I was hoping that we could get you on in particular in the fourth quarter. We've had so many guests on the program right now talking about this idea of who you surround yourself with matters. And I think it's appropriate for you to kind of, weigh in at this time, because I'm not sure there's anyone who understands that concept better, than the CEO at Vistage. So just want to, mention again how thrilled I am to have you.
Thanks for having me, and believe me, I'm still learning a ton every day. So yeah, I hesitate to call myself an expert in anything, but it's great to be here.
Well, there we go. So one of the things that, of course, you took over, as CEO of Vistage in about January of 2016. Prior to that, you were a member. I'm sure maybe when you were a Vistage member, I'm at least guessing you didn't necessarily see that you were going to be CEO of Vistage someday, right?
No.
So, so in some ways, I'd love to get your perspective from Vistage as a member, as you recall it, in terms of the value you got and what that meant for you and other members of your group. And then I think we can pivot to what you get to see today in terms of not only your look at what's going on here in the U.S., but around the world as well.
Yeah, well, you're right. I was a long-time member growing a great business. It was a company called Miller Hyman, and it was Vistage was just central to the whole experience. It was interesting, though, is I always had not always, but I had a relationship with Vistage as well, in that the business I ran had a very similar channel. All these expert, skilled, seasoned leaders who were out being our partners in the field. So I had a connection with some of the previous CEOs that would call me. Again, I say I hesitate to be an expert on anything, but I had run an independent channel, so a lot of people wanted to get my advice on that, and I had some back and forth on Vistage. But what I remember so much is when what always resonates to me is, I think when I first became a Vistage member, I didn't know anything about it, and but I knew one thing. I knew I was in my first CEO gig, and I knew I was in there for about 2 years, and I think it was about the point when I realized I knew I wasn't very good. I mean, that's really what I would say is that I started in 2000 in this first CEO gig. It's an $18 million business, and 2001 hits, and I'm sort of reeling. The first year I thought I was going to be CEO of the year. Everything was working, and then it started hitting, and I really didn't know where to turn. And that's the best way for me to say it. I didn't know where to turn, and I use that point a lot because I keep in this job too. I just see that our members, there's a turning point for all of us, a turning point, right? My turning point was finally realizing, I didn't get it. And I had a board member who said to me, do you know anything about this company called Vistage? Because I think he was just getting tired of my calls every day, because I was calling him all the time. He'd been a CEO. And that, it was just really interesting, because that's what sort of changed it. And then we have all these turning points. Whenever people ask me, there was this big one for me as a leader. The big one for me as a leader is when the group realized what I did is, when I lost confidence in someone on my team, is I turned them into sort of a non-person. I didn't get it until we talked about it. They said, one of the group members said, how you are? When someone can't make it anymore, you just quit paying attention to them. I went, do I do that? Everybody, yeah, you do that. Whoa! that was such a turning point for me to realize that I needed to move quicker, to be clear with people. And then I think what was so great about my whole Vistage experience, so I get nostalgic, is that when I started to find out my rhythm of where I could help other CEOs, then it really gets exciting. Because not only am I getting help, man, I started to go, hey, like my sweet spot was understanding customers. My sweet spot was being able to really understand how you manage marketing. I got to have that sort of expertise at the table. So all that fueled a sort of a crazy run in my career that was so much with Vistage. There were so many big decisions along those lines. And I feel like every CEO, if you corner every one of us, you'd say, if you could say, what are the 5 or 3 or 1, whatever it is, decisions you made that could define your tenure, we could all do it. And I think Vistage ends up being that resource to bring those big decisions to.
Yeah, and I want to get to the specifics of some of the decisions you talked about, because obviously that's a real important factor. I also think that there's all kinds of books about leadership and management, culture, and all this kind of stuff. And how many things that are out there that really give guidance to a CEO about how they're supposed to spend their time every day? What is that supposed to look like? CEO is this title that is bantied about, at all different levels of an organization, and yet I'm not always certain that it's really clear. All right, now that my organization is reached, what am I supposed to do now? And this is, I would imagine, where you see where CEOs can be really helpful to one another in that regard.
It's such a great point. It's funny when you said that, Leo, was really one of the big things that drove me to Vistage. Is I had this one board member that at every board meeting, he would ask me to organize where I spent my time. He would ask that very question. And it sort of had me reeling, because every time we would have that discussion, I was sort of scattered by it. And I didn't really get how important that was. And especially as a board member with the new CEO, they want to know where you're spending time. And you're right, there was no template on it. Eventually, I feel like I sort of built a model in my head. And one of the things that was really a big aha for me is how much time I needed to spend making sense, what I call, of the meaningful outside. You hear things like work in your business or on your business, but really for me as a CEO, it's my job to make sense of what's happening outside of my company. And that's where early on as a CEO, I didn't spend any time. And so when you don't do that, you're constantly having all these unintended consequences.
Well, and I think too, the more you spend time on the outside, the greater capacity and to be able to really make good decisions, right? And to help others help you make good decisions. So let's stay back when you were a member for a moment. How do you feel the group helped you just in the decision-making process? Because as we know, when you're the CEO and you're getting I think really earnest, thoughtful, good advice from people, but usually it comes from their lens of marketing or finance or HR or whatever that happens to be. And you're not really sitting with people who have either the understanding or the experience of what it's like to make a decision for an entire organization. What does that look or really feel like? And what are all the considerations there? And to your point, a lot of it is what's going on in the environment as much as maybe what's happening inside. So maybe speak to the decision-making piece, because I know it's so central to a lot of the value proposition of Vistage right now is making those really good decisions and getting the help to do that.
Yeah, I think that's what unites us as CEOs. We're all in the business of making decisions. It's fine. I think one of the things is that we can all, as you said, get advice from people. And oftentimes, this is where Vistage changes your lens, is that what we don't realize we do oftentimes is we go to get advice from people that we already know how they're going to react. So we do it because we just want that affirmation, I'm right or I'm wrong. And then we go, oh, see, we made a great decision here. And I think that's what's really different about, and where Vistage helps is, it takes a little time, is that, I use this word relationship integrity, is that I listen. So I became a better listener to people that provide advice because they actually knew who I was, knew how I thought, had taken time to understand it. So now I can listen better. And that's what I always found as a leader, is when people would give me advice, what I'd really say to my head is, yeah, but you don't know what I'm going through. Or you don't get this, So that's where Vistage, now it takes a while to get there because I have to open up so they know where I'm good, where I'm bad, my weaknesses, my strengths, where I struggle. And now when I get that advice and someone, calls BS on you, is what they do at a Vistage meeting, I listen better. It might have still always been there for me, but I listen better because I think, Leo knows me, and when he's giving me this, he's got all this relationship integrity that we've built up with each other. That's what's different. It makes you listen differently.
So if I were to in a word or in a sentence say the difference, you try to go from a place of just affirmation to exploration, right? Kind of makes sense.
Word.
Okay.
Great word. Great. I love that's a great word, and we don't actually know we're doing that, by the way, because like you said, all the books we read say, hey, you got to reach out, go find a mastermind group, talk to a few people, get another lunch with a former or another CEO, and so but you really, it's the way I think about it. The way I would present all the information when I'm not in a Vistage group is I present it in a way that the only answer you're going to give me is the one that I want, right? Because hey, what do you think? And everything you're hearing, you go, well, that sounds like I would do the same thing. You don't know enough, right? And you haven't taken the time to know me. That's what's different about this. Now, you got to believe, this is what I say where I listen better to, is you actually got to believe that there's wisdom in the group. And that takes a little while, especially for a lot of people that have had success. I found out for early on at Vistage, I sort of thought I knew everything. And even when I listened to people, I thought, oh, boy, I just do this. It took me a little while to realize I didn't know everything, thank goodness, because I knew I didn't, but it's still, I thought I had an opinion on it. Because you got to believe that the group will do a better job than you. Some people, they don't believe that. And those are the ones that I find that I just say, hey, you don't belong, right? You have to believe that these people together collectively are going to be able to help you think through things. You still make the decision. It's on you. But that's, sometimes that can be a tough belief to, like you said, to go explore rather than just affirm. And I find as a leader, that can be tough. One other thing I found is that one of my fellow members said something to me early on in my tenure as we were exploring a challenge and I was trying to make a decision. He said, what makes you believe there's a right and a wrong? And it was great because everything at that point I had presented as this, oh, that's bad, this is good, bad, good. He goes, well, were you open to the possibility that maybe whichever decision you make, you're going to put so much energy into it, it's going to be right? And I went, no, I haven't thought about that. And that's a piece of advice I give to everybody now. But just think about how different that changes the way you make. I was making decisions like, really bad things or really good. That was the pendulum. When I don't know, maybe it's just about where I'm committed. Like the group gives you the confidence in that.
Yeah, and I think sometimes the group can really show you that there's an and, not always just an or that how many people who come into meetings, whether it's a CEO who asks for the group and say, all right, I'm looking to decide between A and B. And then the group informs you that there's C, D, and E also, right? That there's other ways to think about this that you're not thinking about it. You also brought up a great point, I think, as well, in terms of when you're a part of a group like that and you get to know one another, not just know one another as CEOs, but know one another as people. And this can oftentimes really get to the heart of certain issues when the CEO may be struggling with a decision and what the members who get to know that CEO really well know, you're not so much struggling with the decision. You know what to do. However, there's something about it that's bothering you. So let's get to the heart of that. Why is this getting to you so much? Why is this difficult for you? And all of a sudden now you're exploring issues and having people ask you questions that it's not like your subordinates are going to ask you those kinds of questions, right? I mean, that doesn't happen. But in this forum, it seems like that's where you can get to the heart of a lot of things.
It's a great insight, and it also goes back to this point I made earlier, is that until we get to that level of relationship integrity, we're never gonna have that discussion. If I just grab you to go out to a lunch because we used to be colleagues, I'm gonna tell you what I think, and you're gonna, sounds good, Sam. I think you're a good decision maker. I'd go, you're right. It's gotta be like, why won't you make? We have I'm with my old chair that I was with way back when, so it's really great. It's sort of tough actually because I feel like I can't be quite as open since it's, I'm running Vistage, but I just love working with my chair, Don Myers. But I'd say in my old group, we were really good about that piece of it. If somebody surfaced an issue and they didn't make a decision on it, and then they wanted to do it again at the next meeting, we just go, oh, we already talked about that. You let us know when you made a decision, then we'll talk about it again. But because sometimes it'd be like, hey, we already agreed. You know what has to happen. Don't take us through the thought process again. Tell us when you get that done. And I loved how that really drove all of us to make decisions.
So many of the guests we've had on the show, no matter who they are, we've had best-selling authors and CEOs and artists and people like that, most of whom are doing what they're doing today is not part of some grand 30-year plan, to be where they are. It just, there were things that people they met, things they were open to along the way, things that influenced them. So before I kind of pivot to your view of Vistage as CEO versus as a member, I'd love it if there are any particular, whether it's any particular individuals or turning points for you that were, sent you in a direction maybe that may have been unexpected because you were open to ideas and other people that came into your life.
No question about it. Yeah, I think all of us, have, if we get sort of where we want in life and feel like we're on the right path, there's a little luck, and there's always people that helped us get there, always. And I feel blessed by a few. I look back at this mentor I had in my first CEO role. He was one of the board members I told you that pushed me to Vistage. And after the first board meeting, there was a big discussion around financing and all sorts of details that I didn't have an experience on. And he pulled me aside and he said, hey, that was a good discussion. What do you think? And he started asking me really difficult questions on the financial side. And I BS'd. He goes, hey, do me a favor. You actually don't know anything. So let's you and I spend some time. So next meeting, you can actually provide some feedback instead of pretending, because you didn't fool me. Man, I still have a relationship with him. That person, my chair, who's Don Myers, who's been a great friend of mine. He's really the one that has opened my eyes to this kind of ability to really be. You say it all the time, Leo. I've heard you say this, but this ability to be present. I mean, that's a Don Myers. That has changed the way my life and my business has operated. When at home, it's kind of his thing. When at home, think only of family. When at work, think only of business. And to be present, that it's sort of weird to talk about how liberating that actually was when I started to understand it, right? Just focus here, right? That was fantastic. And then really a great mentor who just died 2 weeks ago, but he's just one of my favorite people in the world, was a gentleman by the name of Bob Miller. He was the founder of Miller Hyman, the company I ran, and really was the first person, ever to build a whole sales training business that was around ethical, high integrity selling. And this belief he had, it just changed the way I thought about it. He believed that he had that there's never anything you ever have to do to manipulate a customer in any way, right? It's all about transparency, where you sit, where they sit, and just to watch how that changes the world of the way you interact with customers and takes all the conflict away. Those are big, and just watching how he treated people, is just such a great gift for me.
Well, it's great to talk about all those both of those folks. It's again a common theme of that won't surprise you at all among our guests is not one of them ever laid claim to I'm exactly where I am in life because I did it all by myself, right? Nobody is doing that. In fact, they laugh at the notion of it. So let's move a little bit to you're being CEO of Vistage. So you went from being a member, of course, you've been CEO of an organization, Miller Hyman for quite some time prior to that. Here you are at CEO of Vistage. So what would you regard as your view, maybe not only just your view from the CEO's chair, but maybe some things that you didn't expect, maybe some surprises about all of this that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I got a couple surprises. They're ones you probably are more skilled on than me with all the research you've done. I think one of the big surprises for me was when we did our first real detailed customer and member outreach to figure out, where the things they valued most and all that. As I stumbled across, we had over 11,000 verbatims where people, members were so amazing on this information, but I sort of stumbled as we started to collect the data on what a big detractor it was in the group when we brought someone into that group that didn't fit. What I mean by didn't fit is like they didn't believe in the operating principles of the group. They maybe weren't at the same level of understanding of business. We kept looking for these detractors on when people leave. Why do they leave? And this ended up being the biggest one, right? They, I'd say biggest, and the other is they just retired or rung the bell, which we're all excited about. But it would be when the group changed dramatically because the wrong person was brought in there, and how that infected the whole group. That was huge, and we've been trying to drive a big initiative to help everybody understand that this isn't, these groups, as you talk about in your book. I mean, yeah, they can be really powerful, but if you let them get wobbly, you gotta get that back on track here, because that group with one new person automatically changes. That was for me, really something important. Another part that I saw that has been fun to sort of reassemble is that a lot of the extra things, I'll say it, I kind of look at it like frequent flyer miles, all the extra stuff we try and do at Vistage to support our members with other tools, help them make decisions, whether it be research, whether it be online networks. All that stuff is all designed to actually go through the group, not around it. And so I saw a lot of miscommunication where members didn't understand that, and where groups weren't really understanding that. The core will always be the group and the chair and the relationship there. So trying to refine that. One final one I saw is just a lot of great ideas, but forgetting in some ways with a lot of our efforts that our core business, SMB CEOs, is still really sexy and all sorts of great work to do ahead there. And there's a million ideas, but I like that idea the best. I want to serve those people more than anybody.
Yeah, no, I'll tell you, to your first point, it's so interesting to me when you think about, and this isn't just about a group, this is any relationship we have. Whenever we take any part of it for granted, whenever we think that something's a given, and like that safe environment you're talking about, right? Where I noticed it when I would lead learning teams of graduate students. And you're trying to have this really safe environment where people would express opinions and not have a lot of judgment flying around and all that, but people being really open with one another. The one time that somebody decides to poison the well, it doesn't just hurt the person who was the recipient of it in that moment. It sends a message to everybody in that room that, like, whoa, you can't. And it is so tenuous. I mean, this idea that we've got this really safe environment has to be just held, I think, so close, with regard to making sure that that's never taken for granted, from one meeting to the next, and that you've got the right kind of people. And I think it also speaks, of course, to, when we talk about the 5 factors of what makes a group work really well, it's having the right people in the room. And that can mean a lot of things. But definitely it means a lot with regard to, group norms and understanding what the rules of engagement are and how we treat one another. Because, yeah, I would imagine that can be, pretty rough.
Big. Yeah, it's big. It's funny because and as I listen to you, I think about what I learned so much is back to Vistage, and what's changed as my leadership style is because of that dynamic you just noted, and as I felt being part of this group, is I'm that way now in meetings internally. If I hear something that's way off course, I don't just let it sit and go, oh, I'll solve that later. I stop right then and say, whoa, what did you just say? I need to make sure I understood what you meant by that comment, because that sounded really abrasive, and I'm trying to figure out I don't let any of those underhanded comments sit, because I find that people leave then going, what just happened? I'm going to make sure every meeting we all know what just happened, right? And solve it right there, because that is what can feel strange to our members if that the wrong member gets in there and poisons the well. Most of our chairs are so skilled at just making sure that doesn't get off track.
Are there any particular similarities or differences that you would care to highlight with regard to what you see as far as group meetings in the U.S. versus other parts of the world where you operate?
Yeah, there's a couple. I mean, what's great about our business is that I really believe that it fits everywhere, right? It fits everywhere. And, we even have great growth in China, as you know, and that was an area where people just figured, oh, CEOs wouldn't open up. What I do think can happen if you look at it differently, like if you look across the world here, I would say that sometimes the way decisions are made can impact that a little bit, right? In the UK, things are a little bit more hierarchical, right? So you can find that if you're sitting there, somebody from the US, and you listen to that, you might have a little bit different bent on it. It might feel a little bit more like, the people at the table are not getting enough input from their employees. They probably are, but that's what it feels like. But it's a little bit more hierarchical, right? Other parts of the world, it feels like they can't make a decision and they got to talk to 5 other people, right? And so it moves a little bit at a slower pace here. But I think there's a little bit of difference in that. That's cultural on how people make decisions. But what's interesting is it's the same things that pop up to have an effective group and to get effective experience. It comes down to these things about, you say it all the time, you got to be vulnerable, right? You got to open up. You got to open up, and you got to have this relationship integrity. You got to have that with everybody. And I say, and you got to roll sleeves up and hard, heavy lifting. And everybody, and no matter where you are in the world, those things will bring a group together. You may be a little slower on how you make decisions. We may have to be a little bit more proper with the way we confront somebody, but we'll get to the same end. I have this thing. It's actually not on my wall yet, but I just had my assistant put together. It was a really interesting thing in HBR last month. I don't know if you saw it, but it talked about the way different decisions are made, how collaborative they are, and how hierarchical they are by country. And it mapped it. It was very interesting. I looked at it and went, yeah, it's sort of similar to how.
Oh, that's great. Do you know where that was from?
Yeah.
It was Harvard Business Review last month, you said, right? Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, it was HBR, but I had the piece. It was right here. Look at it. It was like, it was top down and consensual versus egalitarian and hierarchical, with the United States sitting in that left-hand quadrant, for example, and this lower right-hand quadrant being Germany, hierarchical and consensual. It's a great piece, though.
That is great. That is great. One of the things that I talk about in light of the Edelman Trust Barometer info and the credibility that peers have is that for CEOs today, in addition to communicating down through your organization, understanding key influencers and communicating across your organization so you can build real support, for any initiative you may try to put forward, is really essential. One of the things I'd like to bring up too, because obviously knowing Vistage well, I know that there's a lot of value not only in the meetings and for what members provide for one another, outside of that meeting context, but I also know that in addition to the CEO Confidence Index, which has been, around for well over a decade right now, the Wall Street Journal Small Business CEO Survey, you're really investing a lot in content against that speaks very specifically to your audiences to give them that, I think extra, leg up, as for many of the CEOs in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis, they said we weren't better run companies necessarily, but we were better prepared, and Vistage helped us be better prepared. This seems to me, from a content standpoint, yet another way that you can help your members be better prepared for what's around the corner and what's next. Is that fair?
Yes, and we've been really working hard to organize it. We have, we're just blessed with this unbelievable amount of thought leadership and intellectual property. What we've been doing is we've done a lot of research on this decision model, we call it, the way CEOs make decisions, and use that as a framework on how we're cataloging all of our thought leadership and intellectual property. So it's a little bit easier model that follows the way people, would actually think about how they find information. So rather than just, doing a Google search, making sure that if you've got a strategy issue, we've done the heavy lifting to triage it and make sure that it's in in that sort of categorization. At the same time, what we keep doing is reaching out to our members to figure out what are the issues they want us to really dig in and research, with the goal being to come up with an effective research project that then we can take back and put into tools that they can implement. We did a great one on talent planning. We have one coming up now where we had surveyed the members and they were saying, hey, give us more on customer relationships and driving that top line. So we've just partnered with Salesforce.com, and this is going to be a really exciting study. The goal, so I want all our members to get this world-class research, then some tools that they can execute on and implement. And we consider that to be our responsibility. If we're going to help them make great decisions, we got to make sure that the things that are big that could impact them, we're spending time thinking about and at least giving them a framework to make decisions upon.
Well, I think what you're also doing is something that you spoke to right at the beginning, where you're trying to give people even a greater window into what's going on outside, right? Because the better you can understand that environment and what's happening and what's going on, not only in a particular locale, but around the world, can be, so helpful.
And we forget about that, by the way. Just think back in our days. So you're old enough to remember this with me. It's back, it was like early 80s. It was revolutionary when everybody said, hey, if you want to be great at customer service, go listen to Disney. Until then, nobody did that. They were like, I just look at my own company.
Right.
But I find that as CEOs, it's really easy for us to get myopic and just put our head down in our businesses. We got to keep our eyes open, and we want to help our members get there.
Well, and let's face it, one of the differences between, a Vistage CEO group and ones that are industry specific is that it, by definition, that's what you're doing. You're sitting around with other people who are outside of not only your company, but even outside of your industry sector. And you get this opportunity to learn things and see practices that may be commonplace, elsewhere, unheard of where you are. And then you're like, that could work in my company, that could work in our business. And we've seen countless examples, I think, over time of where members have adopted industry practices, from outside their own and been extremely successful with it.
I agree. Yeah, that's the magic of it right there. And it might be a $100 million company listening to a $5 million company who has a better marketing idea than, the 100 million company and their staff of 20. They might have a better idea. That's where it gets really fun. What I find so interesting too about those ideas, Leo, and I think I was the same way as a CEO, is there's this weird thing that happens is you don't want to go tell your company for a while where you're getting the ideas. So when you come in, and there's about a year period where you want to be the one going, I was thinking about it. And they go, the boss is really up to his game. He's really smart now, right? Where eventually you start to say, I'm getting I got a great group I'm part of, but it's just strange. You want to take the credit at the start.
Of course, what happens over time, as you well know, and key executive groups will tell you this all the time, once they figure it out, and all of a sudden, they'll come in on a Thursday or Friday, and there's all this stuff being thrown at them. They think, I think someone was just at their Vistage meeting the other day.
my team started to call it it was like the Vistage hangover is what they would say.
Yeah.
So when Sam gets back, he's got the Vistage hangover, and they'd be ready for stuff coming at him.
Yeah, they know it's coming. Hey, just to close out a little bit, for those who are listening only on audio, what you won't be able to see is there's a board behind Sam with a lot of really terrific quotes on it. Sam, I was wondering if you could maybe look at one of those quotes and pick one, and maybe have that be something that you leave our audience with here today.
Well, it's John F. Kennedy one that sits right on my right shoulder. Effort and courage are not enough without purpose. Purpose, and for us, our whole purpose is we exist solely to help high-integrity leaders make great decisions that benefit their companies, their families, and their communities. It's got to be about purpose. As long as you can keep that front and center, it's amazing how easy it is to make decisions.
Well, with that, thank you very much, Sam. I can't tell you again. This was every bit as rich a conversation as I expected. I know our audience will get a ton of value out of it. And I assume, too, that if they want to learn more about Vistage, they can just visit Vistage.com and see if maybe being part of a peer group, whether they're a CEO or a key executive or small business owner, is right for them.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'd love to talk to him. Thanks for spending time with me, Leo. I look forward to seeing you soon.
Oh, you bet. You have a great day. Thank you.
All the best.
Thanks for joining us today. To learn more about Peer Advantage, to submit questions to Leo and our guest, and to subscribe to the Year of the Peer podcast, please visit us at leobottari.com. It's LeoBottary.com. This podcast is produced by me, Randy Cantrell, hosted, of course, by Leo Bottary. Music provided by Kevin MacLeod, Vibe Ace, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 license.